Hi, this is Jan van der Menko and welcome to another great tutorial about Adapt. In this video you will get a quick view about setting up a propagation. After this video you will get a better view on how to set up your propagation between the keyframes and how to generate depth maps from Adapt. Here I have my project set up as we left in part 1. For the new viewers who missed the first part, I suggest viewing it first. In order to propagate depth information, I first need to determine my range width creating two keyframes. I can however calculate depth from one frame, but the result will be less accurate. As you can see, I've made a depth map for the first keyframe, which in this case starts at 170. I pre-made the depth maps already in Photoshop, and also the depth maps for the other keyframes. So instead of losing your attention, I'm only going to create one frame which is 180. Oh, by the way, I've made all the keyframes and the Photoshop files available for you to download. Yes, that saves some time of course, right? I grouped all the layers together and gave them a corresponding frame number, so you can recognize them easily. Let me just quickly hide all the other layers so you can see what we are doing. So here I have frame 180 created and given all individual parts of the scene a gray value. Light gray color for the nearest object relative to the camera and a darker gray color for the furthest object away from the camera. I started with creating the foreground first and secondly the background. I've created these first for the color reference and in order not to adjust my min and max depth values. With the group selected, I'm now going to duplicate it so I can make one selection from it. Now, with the duplicated group selected, I'm going to merge all the layers together. The way you can do this is by holding your Control key on your keyboard plus your E. So that's Control plus E. I'm now making a selection from the frame and copying it to the corresponding frame within Adapt. So let's head back to Adapt. I can jump to a frame by filling in the number. Before I can paste the frame on it, I have to tell the software that this frame needs to be annotated. I can do this by clicking on the key icon, located just slightly above the timeline. Alright, done this, I can now right click on the frame. A new pop-up menu will now appear. You have a couple of options in this menu. We are now pasting the depth map on the keyframe by selecting Paste to Annotation. In the Layers window on the top right of the screen, I can now check Annotated Depth. This will show the depth map I have created in Photoshop in my main workspace area. Now, sometimes a difference in contrast will occur while pasting in a keyframe. As you can see, frame 180 is much darker than 170. To fix this, we have to go back to Photoshop. To fix, we have to check if the image mode in Photoshop is correctly set. In this case, the grayscale was set on default. We are now going to set it to RGB. It's now changing in general for all the layers in Photoshop. This should not take long if you have only one layer. With the layer selected, I'm going to copy and paste it back to the frame in Adapt. So now, as you can see, the contrast between frame 170 and 180 is the same again. Since we created two depth maps in Photoshop and pasted to Adapt, we can now propagate the remaining depth between those keyframes. Up in the left corner you can see a window called Shot Settings. In this window you can select different kind of algorithms to calculate depth information. Every shot can have its own settings. Before I'm going to propagate, I can already set them up. For doing this quickly, I can display all the shot settings by clicking on Shortcuts in the timeline control options. Now I have a nice overview of all my shortcuts. I noticed that the first shot ends at frame number 258. Now we don't want to let it calculate that far. By clicking on All, you can show the keyframes all again. Back to frame 180. Now instead of letting Adept calculate all the keyframes to 258, I'm going to place a shortcut on frame 181. Let's click on the shot icon in the timeline control options. With the new shot set, I'm going to select an algorithm for the propagation. As you can see, you have different kind of algorithms that you can set. Now the nice thing about Adept is that you can select multiple algorithms that can work together. So you have a more powerful algorithm and more accurate and precise, resulting in depth maps. If you are working from 2D and created your own depth maps, I strongly suggest to use the fast or accurate algorithm for the propagation. When you have set your algorithms and checked, I can now click on Update Render button. Update is now being propagated for the first shot. On the timeline you can view the process. Red and yellow borders around the frames indicates the two render passes. The red border indicates the first pass and the yellow indicates the returning pass. While it's rendering, I'm going to explain why I created a keyframe for 180 and not for frame 190. While it's rendering, I'm going to explain why I created a keyframe for 180 and not for frame 190. I also could create a keyframe for, let's say, frame 190 and extend the shot. The reason I created a shortcut for frame 181 is the fact that there is a lot of lighting changes going on the whole scene. If we look at frame 183 for instance, there's a big difference between the next frame. It's a lot darker. Why is that? Because all the algorithms notice the changes of the contrast and will lose the detail you expect it to have during propagation. In this case, I'm better off creating more shortcuts to get better quality. The rendering has completed. You can also see the shot has been changed in contrast. I just wanted to let you see how the algorithm approaches this. Let's take a look at the rendering result by checking generated depth in the layer windows, which is now available. Right, that's the end of this second tutorial. In the next tutorial you get a quick overview on how the project folder is set up. If you want to watch more tutorials, go online on our website and stay tuned. Thank you for watching. This was Jan from Damenco. See you!